You got to get this book. You're going to read this very quickly because every page flows into the next page. It's so easily readable, easily accessible, I should say. Folks, thank you so much for joining me. I have the privilege today to bring you a guest who's an actor, director, producer, writer, and author. His latest book, Bill Duke, My 40-Year Career on Screen and Behind the Camera. Mr. Duke, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
I'd like to jump right into something that you brought up in the book. And ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Duke, it's a story of his life, but it's also a story about the life and times of a people. He talks about Dr. King's, the murder, the assassination of Dr. King, the assassination of JFK and RFK, and what that meant to black folks. Mr. Duke, could you please elaborate on what it was like to live at that time and hear about MLK being assassinated and RFK and JFK?
Well, Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, Dr. King, Bobby Kennedy particularly, and JFK gave the black community hope because it was a time of segregation, a time when we were mistreated and treated like animals. We were not respected. White folks were just horrible to us. And Dr. King said, don't hate, that we have to get our rights back. We have to do all these things. And Bobby Kennedy did that also. But when they were murdered, and all of them were murdered, it took our hope away. It gave us a deep hole within us. And I think we've been recuperating and recovering from that ever since. And I think many leaders now are afraid to really step up because they don't want to be killed either. But the fact of the matter is that the issues that we faced then are some of the same issues we face now. If you look at Ava DuVernay's, film about the path from high school to prison, because we're graduating kids from high schools in this country with third and fourth grade reading skills. How do you survive in a global economy with a fourth and fifth grade reading skill?
I have no idea.
You don't.
You don't.
You go to jail because you do things to survive that are illegal, but you have no options in your mind because it's horrific.
It is. It is. You know, as I was reading your book and as I was reading the passage about MLK and RFK, I looked at the way that you described it. You described it as a deep numbness. You described the pain, and you went through, he said it was a mixture of rage, sorrow, pain, frustration, resentment, and anger. It was a feeling that made you want to hurt somebody badly, somebody white, somebody who was part of the system, somebody who caused this. And I know this is right out of the headlines, but I couldn't help but think about Liam Neeson and the recent issue that he had where he described his own pain. But your pain, the pain that you would describe of a group of the people, not just you, that was about leaders being attacked. And it just was a parallel. I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, wow, Mr. Duke's describing the pain of a people who want justice. And Liam Neeson wanted that for one individual. He was willing, he wanted to kill somebody over the infraction, and don't forget me wrong, a horrific infraction, but that of one individual. Then I'm seeing a lot of leaders come out and say, well, we understand how he feels. But do you think society understands how a group of people feel when our leaders are struck down? I don't know. I don't know what I'm asking you. Maybe just your reaction to the juxtaposition of those two issues.
I think they're both relevant issues. When you look at Dr. King, for example, when you look at Malcolm, when you look at Medgar Evers, you look at Bobby Kennedy, there's one thing you know. They knew they were going to die for what they stood up for. But in their minds, in their hearts, in their souls, there was something more important to them than their individual lives and survival. And it was us. It was their children. They wanted a better future for their children. And so they were willing literally to sacrifice their lives for the future of our cultures. It's something that it's hard to describe, it's hard to even understand, because most of us today are so self-centered, so selfish, living in a millennial time where, it's about just you, but what else is there to care for? And if you're not taught that, then you just care about yourself and your own goals. And that's what's scary, because there's some real challenges we're facing that we're not paying attention to. And there was I don't know if you saw 60 Minutes 3 weeks ago, young Asian man, he was an artificial intelligence expert and robotics expert. And he projects and predicts that in 15 years, because of robotics and artificial intelligence, there'll be a 40% unemployment rate globally, not nationally, globally. And we're talking about building walls and Democrats and Republicans. Why aren't we talking about the future of our children in terms of what they're going to face in terms of this catastrophe? We're not talking about that. And see, the boogeyman doesn't care if you believe in him or not. He'll just eat you. Nope. Am I lying?
No, you're not lying. Being spot on. Like, nobody cares about your feelings, And as you bring up, the responsibility we have as human beings to stand for something. What's the old adage? Stand for something or fall for anything. I'm thinking about Colin Kaepernick. And just recently, he and Eric Reed received settlements with the NFL. Now, we don't know how much money they were given, but they were given some amount of money for the grievances that they had, not being able to play, being blackballed. What are your thoughts? Living through the 60s and seeing, people protest and fight back and black folks band together. I saw Colin Kaepernick take that knee, and that many people did it with him. What were you thinking when you saw this sort of unfold, and it looked like one guy, in this case 2 guys, Eric Reed and a couple others, but not really the coalescence of the majority of the players who had the power, Mr. Duke, who just didn't stand behind him?
Well, he's kneeled in the tradition of Dr. King, Malcolm, Bobby Kennedy, Medgar Evers, Rosa Parks, and others, because there was something more important to him than his personal survival and his job. He felt something larger as a responsibility that he had to address. Many players, they care about their check. And I'm not saying caring about your check is not important, because we all got to pay our bills, etc. But he was talking about the future of his children. He wanted them to be respected. He wasn't kneeling against the flag. He was kneeling for the dignity that players would have, rather than being treated as, Donald Sterling said, something like, well, they're mine. Yeah. I pay their bills. He talked about athletes like they were, or like the lady in Mr. Trump's cabinet that told LeBron James to shut up and dribble.
Absolutely. That's what she said.
Shut up and dribble. Did you know LeBron James in his Bel Air mansion out here, did you hear what happened to him?
Someone defaced it, if I'm not mistaken.
They wrote the word nigger across his gate.
Yeah.
LeBron James. Kanye West is a very controversial figure, but I think he's one of the greatest lyricists that ever existed in terms of music. I really do. And I think it's in School Days. I forgot which album it was, but he had a great lyric. And what he said was, "Oh, my people, for that dollar, how low we'll stoop. But when you're riding in your Benz, you're still a nigga in a coupe."
True words, very true words.
What would happen to you or me if, you were in LA and say your lady and my lady and myself went out for dinner one night, and after that we're driving through Beverly Hills and your wife says, hey, wait a minute, and you know, on Rodeo Drive, look in that jewelry store. Look at that watch. We get out the car and we stand in front of the jewelry store for more than 10 minutes. Mm. What do you think would happen?
Somebody's calling the police on us.
Can we help you? Is there a problem?
Yeah. Shopping while black, existing while black. We're seeing a lot of that. That's a question I wanted to ask you. People say, Mr. Duke, that it's not that there's more racial issues going on. It's just that we now have smartphones. Well, as someone who grew up in that era, grew up in the 60s, in the eye of the storm, some would say, do you agree that it's just the fact that we're capturing it? There's no more of this or less of this? What's your perspective on that?
I think there's more. I think there's more because I think that there is a seed of hatred that's being planted. Not only divided by race, but the Me Too movement in terms of, you know, men against women and all of that. You know, it's like, you know, I celebrate the Me Too movement in terms of its positive things that happens. But I can tell you many men in Hollywood that friends of mine, they no longer approach women. I mean, I remember a time you could say, that's a beautiful dress you have on, or I have a friend that worked for a network for 15 years. And last year, a lady said to the network that 5 years ago, he looked at her in a way that was suggestive and made her feel uncomfortable. They fired him on the spot. For looking.
Yeah, there's no opportunity to address the situation. Maybe he thought she had a spot on her dress. I don't know. But if you address it at the time, you give him an opportunity to explain his actions. What's happening now, I don't see an opportunity for people to kind of have that dialogue.
There is no dialogue, sir. It's like you're guilty until proven innocent. There's no due process. So, you know, and again, I celebrate the Me Too movement in terms of women's rights, etc. But there are some extreme elements that do things that I think are totally unacceptable.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that I was just talking about this earlier today, one of the founders of the Time's Up organization resigned her presidential position. She's a position I think she runs the organization. She resigned. $1 million, you know, $1 million salary. And I was thinking how all of a sudden all of this stuff is coming out about Hollywood under Donald Trump. And I'm not a Trump supporter in it by any means, right? I'm just out for justice and I want the best person for the job. That's me. But I'm noticing that, you know, these issues have existed for a long time. What's been your experience, or what has been your knowledge in Hollywood about, you know, the casting couch and the way people are treated by those in power?
It's always been here. The casting couch didn't start with Harvey Weinstein. The casting couch existed since the beginning of Hollywood. And it's something that should not exist, should not be, but that's the reality of Hollywood in many ways. There are also some very decent people in Hollywood who hire you based upon your talent, and they ask you for nothing except to bring your talent to the table. But there are many people who take advantage of their power, and because they know that you need their approval or acceptance to get the job, will try to require from you things that are totally immoral, things that are totally against your self-respect and self-regard, but depends on how bad your family needs the money, depends on how this opportunity is going to work for you. A lot of people concede to that, and it's unfortunate, but it's real.
And recently, Terry Crews, he described a situation that occurred with him.
This is a big dude.
Big dude. Right? Doesn't matter. He didn't have power, right?
Well, you know, there's a distinction between power and money.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Very much. Big difference, as you described with the LeBron James getting his house spray painted nigger. Yeah, there you go. Like, him having money didn't stop him from being violated and his house vandalized.
You know, and his children saw that, his wife saw that, and you know, it's. I just think that it's something that I don't know the answer, man. I am disturbed by the fact. See, I'm not disturbed by the problem. I'm disturbed by us not responding to the problem. And I don't want to blame white people and the system for all of the things that happened to us. You know, last year in Chicago, in 3 days, 82 black people killed each other in 3 days. 82. Now, we can blame that on whoever we want. But the fact of the matter is, we killed each other. What does that say to other cultures and other people about us? If we don't care enough about each other, I mean, when I say kill, I'm talking about driving in a car and seeing a family on the porch and with automatic guns mowing down 2 and 3 year old children. The system is not doing that. We do it. And when are we going to start addressing that? When are we going to start addressing the fact that we have a certain responsibility, particularly as men, for our communities? When are we going to stop blaming everybody except ourselves? You know, there was an old saying, whatever you blame, you empower.
Well, I think definitely there's a level, a high level of responsibility we all have to our communities and to our families. But I also think that I've never met somebody who was well off or someone who had a good job who partook in like a reckless lifestyle, really, not a lifestyle of gangbanging or slinging drugs. I mean, I've grown up in D.C. in lower middle class household, and you know, I was on my own since I was 16. But none of the guys I know who were in the streets did that, who had money, who had opportunity, who had jobs lined up, or you know, had these options. So I always look at money and access and resources as part of the path out. And when you have people that don't see a clear path, you brought it up earlier, when people don't have hope, then what's left?
Hurt people hurt people.
There you go.
You know, but the thing is that that's why I have my foundation, and that's why I celebrate a lot of other people who go back to the community. I call it edutainment. You know, you can, you know, what gives me pleasure and hope is in my foundation to see the way these kids come in with a difference in them in terms of when they leave. When they see you care, I mean, I should just give money to the NAACP and everybody else. There's nothing wrong with that because the money is needed. But when you show up and you're there and they see that you care, it's a whole different thing.
It is. I don't know if you've heard about this, but there's an organization, or I would say a movement. It's called ADOS, and it stands for American Descendants of Slaves, and they are championing issues of the income, the wealth and income gap. They're championing issues of, it was started by Yvette Carnell, a Howard graduate, Antonio Moore. He hosts a radio show. He's an attorney. And their idea is that we need to have reparations for what's happened to black folks, descendants of slaves, not just if you're from the Caribbean and you come to America 5 years ago, but people who have their bones in this land. And that we need to address these issues, that we weren't able to create wealth. We weren't able to build. I sometimes, Mr. Duke, think there's a quote that was attributed to Van Jones, and it's this: I am the first male in my family to have full access to all the rights of white people. Like, I just thought about that. Like, I'm the first. And that's amazing that my family's been in America for at least 5-6 generations. What do you think about this idea that blackness should not be just defined as color, but also defined as a shared experience, and that there are a particular set of issues that we have and grievances we have with the United States, not with somebody in the Walmart parking lot calling somebody a nigger, but a government who had government policies in place that made things difficult with redlining, with with the other issues that no access to those home loans, like how that would have helped your parents. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, I think, unfortunately, the system does not support us, I think, as much as it should or could. But I think collectively, we have to begin to understand who we are collectively. There's so much division in our community. I directed two documentaries, one called Light Girls, the other called Dark Girls. And I wrote a book called Dark Girls. There is a hierarchy, the brown paper bag test,
yes,
that you know about.
Yes, sir.
You know that in the 40s and 50s in black churches, in the 30s, you know that there was a brown paper bag on the church door on Sunday. If you put your hand on that bag and it was darker than the bag, you could not go into that black church.
This is the black church.
Black. Does that tell you something?
Yeah. It tells you we're fucked up. That's what it tells you. It's horrible, man. It's horrible.
And online, you should go to hashtag Team Dark Skin, hashtag Team Light Skin. You know about this. Each of them has like 350,000 members. Clashing. Here's the irony. I know white female friends of mine who go to tanning salons twice a week, get Botox lips and butt lifts, crinkle their hair, look more ethnic. Everybody wants to be black except us.
What did Paul Mooney say? Everybody want to be a nigga, but nobody want to be a nigga.
That's right.
That's what he said. Hollywood seems to be its own beast. People like me from the outside looking in, some people call it Hollyweird. But the Jussie Smollett situation looks pretty weird. What are your thoughts? It turns out they're saying that more than likely, the Chicago Police Department said more than likely he fabricated a hate crime hoax. Does Hollywood make you that determined to keep the spotlight on you that you could foresee people going to this type of extent to keep spotlight on them, Mr. Duke?
I don't think everybody. I think that there's some good white people and black people in Hollywood. I've met a number of them who helped me with my career. But as a whole of Hollywood, I have a metaphor that I use, and I use myself in it, and it's a 4-part. And this is why people do what they do if he did this, okay? Number 1, who's Bill Duke? Number 2, you gotta get me and find me Bill Duke. Number 3, find me a younger Bill Duke. Number 4, who's Bill Duke?
Yeah.
Did I lie?
Nah, not at all.
So he probably knows that, right? So he's trying, and maybe he tried to. I can't speak on because I don't know. But the more attention you bring to yourself, particularly online, it goes global. So maybe he felt that, it hasn't been proven yet, but he needed more attention for a longer career or whatever.
Well, it's a tragedy from where we sit. From where I sit, it's a tragedy. I thought, I don't know what's going on, the inner workings, but apparently they're stripping him of some of his acting screen time on the show now. And they got one more episode to shoot. He was supposed to have a big scene. They took that out. He's now bad for business, Mr. Duke.
Well, sometimes desperation, man, and not thinking clearly. I think people are just afraid, and you don't get love out here, man. You don't. If you want love, you better be a florist or something, because no love out here, but you'll be used. I always say this, and people get offended by it, but I think it's true. It's a pimp and hoe game, man. It's a pimp and hoe game, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
I keep telling my representation, man, I don't look good in fishnets and pumps. You know what I'm saying? If you get like 10%, why don't you put some fishnets and pumps on? You know what I'm saying? Because I can guarantee you, you don't want to see me in fishnets and pumps, man.
No, you good. I'm good. I'm good.
You good?
I'm good, man. Look, I love you, Mr. Duke, but I'm good, man. Wow. You know, recently we talk about like the motivation, and obviously you expressed it in this book, guys. You got to get this book. You're going to read this very quickly because every page flows into the next page. It's so easily readable, easily accessible, I should say. You know, Monique and Steve Harvey had a conversation. I'd like to get your thoughts about it, where Steve Harvey told Monique she need to basically shut up and act and stop complaining. And we black, so we don't need to be speaking back and talking back. And, oh, man, they came for Steve Harvey. I don't know if you're aware of it, but if you are, what are your thoughts about that? Do black people need to shut up in Hollywood and just be glad to be there and get their money? Or is there room, should they be standing up, as we stated earlier, about, you know, banding together on issues that matter?
I think everybody should stand up. But it's how you stand up. You know, there was a saying back in the 60s, and I never forgot this. And the saying was, sometimes you have to lose a battle to win the war. Mm. And so you choose your battles very carefully. If you're going to lose the war, why have the battle? But we're not strategic. You know, we you know, it's based on emotion, not strategy. I mean, we need strategy. There's a distinction. You know, sometimes I feel we're playing checkers in a chess game. You know, if it's a chess game, play chess. And they're going to say, you're a good little checker player. Look at the little checkers. That's so good, right? Everybody playing chess. So we have to learn how to play chess rather than checkers. And I understand the emotions, because sometimes there are injustices that make you feel bad, they're painful, they hurt. But sometimes you have to really understand how to respond, not just out of emotion, but how to respond in terms of winning the war.
Well, you know, Steve, he apologized to her. I mean, he got a lot of backlash. He said he apologized if he sounded like he was, you know, beating up on her, and I don't know, man. I think that when you're in that position where you don't have power, you don't own studios, you don't own the show. I mean, I got a humble show, Mr. Duke, but it's mine, and I can do with it, and I can bring on Mr. Duke, and whatever you say, I air it. I don't care. But if you don't have control over your medium, your platform, then I guess you do have to shut up to a certain degree, or either leave.
Well, I mean, you know, it's the golden rule. He who has the gold rules. And so the fact of the matter is, but what's important today is what you're doing. I mean, you're an example of self-entrepreneurship. I mean, you're not waiting. You know, the internet gives you global distribution with a touch of a button. Issa Rae started off with webisodes. And she collected a certain number of eyeballs online, and the studios, the network, HBO, wanted the eyeballs, so she's got a good deal over there. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. It's been on for like 10 years now, right? And those guys started off as webisodes. Danny DeVito saw it, and those eyeballs translated into them being on the air for 10 years. So it's, a lot of us are emotional, and I'm not saying we shouldn't be emotional, but along with the emotion, why don't we have strategy? And you are an example of what could be done.
Wow.
You're not saying, oh, the white man did this or the system's so horrible. No, you got this beautiful studio. You invite people on. and you can press a button, the message can go globally and like that. And I can tell, I don't know you, but it hasn't been easy for you. You had to come to a point where you said, you know something, I'm going to do it. And you did. Yeah. But a lot of people, instead of doing that, complain, make excuses, forever. And I understand the pain and frustration, but today I was in this film made in 2 weeks with 5 cell phones. 5 cell phones, sir. What's stopping us?
Us. And look, and a lot of hard work. It's hard. And look, and I don't look good in fishnets either. So it was a lot of hard work, Mr. Duke. And let's just face it, some people don't want to put in that work. But I do believe for some of, like, I know what I'm able to do. I know what you've been able to do. I know what others have been able to do. But not everybody can do what you can do or what I can do. So we need politics, Mr. Duke. We need politics that works for you regular folks. And I'm looking at our group of candidates, and I see Kamala Harris, and I see Cory Booker, and I see black folks. One announced their campaign on MLK, the other announced their campaign on the first day of Black History Month. But what are their policies? Do their policies actually help black folks? They got symbolism, but what about actual policies that help black folks? What are your thoughts about this rise of black politicians for the highest office and the policies that they implement?
Well, I think it's good for our children to see that, to see particularly women, black and white, that were banned almost, in the past, now becoming part of things. Black men also, Asian men, Hispanic men, that there is a greater access and opportunity. But the truth of the matter is, a large percentage of black folks did not even vote in the last election. Yeah. So if you don't get off your butt, they blamed, the voter registration was off in certain places. Not every place. I asked certain friends of mine, did you vote? No, man. Why? I don't believe in that stuff. Yeah. If you don't get out and vote and get off your butt and put your ballot in the box, then what are you complaining about? I mean, you it's just the same thing. Excuses after excuses after excuses. I mean, when am I going to get tired of blaming rather than doing?
Yeah. I tend to look at it like it's two sides of it. You got to give people something to vote for, something that excites them. Big ideas, people who are speak to your pain. Like they say, you throw a rock, a hit dog will holler, or the dog that barks the one you hit, or something like that. Well, when you talk about pain and issues, if you're talking about the right issues, people will perk up. But if we're talking about what's going on over there, what's happening in Russia, and we're not talking about what's happening in Poughkeepsie,
that's right,
then people go, well, that's not for me. That's for somebody else. That's been my experience with it. But like I said, I think that black folks give 90% of their votes to the Democratic Party, and my goal is it's not fancy. I just want us to get something for that. Like, we are showing up. We are in numbers, 90% saying this person, we want this person, and those policies need to reflect that we are that committed and that loyal. And up to this point, my opinion, it hasn't. I don't know what your thoughts are on us voting as a bloc.
I'm agreeing with you 100%. I'm not Democrat or Republican. I'm an independent. I listen to what you say, but I look at what you do and how what you're doing is impacting me and my family, my child, my culture. To take my vote for granted is a big mistake. And I think the fact that we didn't show up at the polls the way we should have is why we have the situation that we're in now. And I hope that that changes in the future. But the fact of the matter is that, as I say again, we have to take greater responsibility, not only for ourselves, but for our future. And that's the distinction. I mean, Dr. King didn't just die for the present day that he was in. He talked about his children. He said he hoped there would be a day when they would be judged not by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. And he was willing to put his life on the line for that. You don't see that same kind of commitment. You can talk about how horrible Donald Trump is all you want. Okay, he's a bad guy. That's what you think, okay? What are you going to do for me and my family that I can actually see evidence of in terms of improving my life? I mean, complaining about him, okay, I get it. Okay, keep complaining. Okay, got it. What are you going to do to change and impact my future of my kids? What are you going to do? I'm hearing generalities. I'm not hearing enough specifics that I can identify with. I want to hear that from somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. And that'll be the candidate that I support, will be the candidate that speaks directly to those issues and has a plan. Don't just make it sound good. Don't just show up at the black church for the chicken dinner, but actually have a plan. Like, you got a staff. Like, campaigns are corporations, Mr. Duke, and they have staff, and those staff can put together legislation. They can put together packages. So I think they need to care more.
To support those if they do too, but to support the ones that make sense. And that's what I'm hoping and praying that, something comes out of this positive, that impacts minorities and poor people in the middle class in a positive way. I hope that the gentleman on 60 Minutes was wrong when he said robotics and artificial intelligence will cause a 40% global unemployment rate. I hope that he's wrong, but I don't think he is. I just bought a Tesla car, right? And it's an electric car because I wanted to impact the environment, etc. And when they gave it to me, bought the car, they wanted to put in an automatic driving system that drives you, lets you off, parks the car itself, etc. And I turned it down, and they were shocked. And they said, "I want you to take it." And I said, "Suppose it takes me someplace I don't want to go." I'm from the 60s, man. I'm paranoid.
I'll tell you, that OJ Bronco ride would have never happened if that's the case.
Hey, he would have gone straight.
Come on in.
Make it simple, right?
Well, Mr. Duke, man, like I stated earlier, man, this book is a very easy read. And you have a lot of great quotes on the back for people who love the book as well. T.D. Jakes, Deepak Chopra, Jeff Goldblum, April Ryan. April Ryan went from CNN. I don't know about her, but everybody else is fantastic.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to somebody before we leave. I'm working on a project called Never Stop, and it's a documentary that's about adoption and foster care and the homeless kids when they're aged out that are on the street and they're homeless. And a great lady, she's a senior citizen in her 60s named Miriam Stewart. And she is going to be running in the Senior Olympics, and she's devoting her run to that cause. There's people like that I think we should recognize, people like that, she's running for something she believes in. She's giving what she has to give. So I wish more people would do that, whatever they can do to help causes, to do it.
Well, Mr. Duke, I want to thank you once again for taking time out to share your story and to tell us more about your book. Ladies and gentlemen, Bill Duke, My 40-Year Career on Screen and Behind the Camera. Go get it. Highly recommend it. As I stated very eloquently, put a very passionate book. There's a part in there, Mr. Duke, just in closing, about your grandfather, man. And hey, look, I lost my grandfather many years ago, but it's still a piece of me died with him. And I just want you to know it really touched me. So you got me over here kind of weepy. I'm sure other people are going to be moved emotionally by your book as well.
God bless you, my friend, and thank you so much, okay?
Thank you, sir. You have a good one.
Take care.